The silence in the boardroom was not empty. It was heavy, weighted with the kind of judgment that only comes from someone who believes they hold all the cards. I remember the exact moment the air shifted, the precise second when Julian Thorne's eyes moved from the quarterly projections on the table to me, standing there with my tablet in hand, ready to present the marketing strategy I had spent 3 weeks refining. It was a Tuesday, late afternoon. The light filtering through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Thorne Enterprises headquarters in Manhattan, casting long, sharp shadows across the polished mahogany. I had expected questions about the budget, perhaps a critique of the timeline, maybe even a sharp comment about the color palette of the campaign. What I did not expect was the look of cold disdain that settled over his features, a mask of superiority that stripped away the professional respect we had built over 2 years of working together. He didn't shout. Julian never shouted. His voice was low, controlled, and that made it cut deeper, slicing through the quiet hum of the air conditioning and the rustle of papers to land directly on my chest. He said, without preamble, that he was tired of the games, tired of the subtle maneuvers, and that he would not be another notch on a belt driven by ambition rather than talent. He implied, with a precision that felt calculated to wound, that my presence in the room, my proximity to him, was a transaction I was trying to negotiate with things other than work. He suggested I was using my position to get close to him, leveraging my accessibility for a payoff I hadn't yet named but was clearly hunting. The room froze. The other executives, men and women who knew my work ethic, who had seen me stay until midnight to fix errors that weren't mine, looked down at their notebooks. No one spoke. No one defended me. And I, Selena, 32 years old, head of strategic development, simply stood there, feeling the heat rise in my cheeks not from shame, but from the sheer shock of being so fundamentally misread by a man whose intellect I had always admired. I did not cry. I did not stammer. I did not pull out my phone to show him a picture or flash a ring to prove a point. Instead, I took a breath, a slow, deliberate intake of air that filled my lungs and steadied my heartbeat, because I have learned over the years that reaction is the enemy of clarity. When you are accused, especially in public, especially by someone who holds your livelihood in their hands, the instinct is to fight, to scream, to demand proof of your innocence. But I knew that in that moment, any defense I offered would sound like the very manipulation he was accusing me of. If I said I wasn't interested, it would sound like denial. If I said I was engaged, it would sound like a shield, a convenient excuse to let him off the hook while keeping his attention on me. So I simply closed my tablet, looked him in the eye, and told him that I understood his concern and that I would submit the revised strategy via email by morning. I turned and walked out of the room, my heels clicking softly on the marble floor, a steady rhythm that matched the pounding in my head. I walked past the glass walls of the offices, past the assistants who looked up with curious eyes, and I went straight to my own office, closed the door, and locked it. Only then did I allow myself to sit down, to place my hands flat on the desk, and to look at the left hand resting there, at the simple platinum band on my ring finger that I had turned inward toward my palm before entering the boardroom. I had made a choice months ago to keep my engagement private at work. It was a boundary I set for myself, a way to keep my personal life separate from the high-stakes environment of corporate leadership. I didn't want to be the engaged employee, the one whose wedding planning might distract from her deadlines, or whose husband might be scrutinized by the gossip mill. I wanted to be Selena, the strategist, the problem solver. But now, that privacy had become a weapon used against me. Julian had interpreted my solitude, my lack of a visible partner at company events, my late nights at the office, as availability. He had constructed a narrative where I was hunting him, and in doing so, he had insulted not just my professionalism, but my integrity. The drive home that evening was a blur of red taillights and city noise, but my mind was quiet, operating in a mode of analysis that I often retreat to when the world becomes too loud. I live in Brooklyn, in a brownstone that I bought before I started working at Thorne Enterprises, a space that is entirely mine, filled with books and plants and the quiet hum of a life I built myself. My fiancé, David, was there when I arrived. He was sitting on the couch, grading papers from the university where he taught history. He looked up when I came in, sensing the tension in my shoulders before I even spoke. David is a good man, steady and kind, the kind of person who believes in the inherent goodness of people until proven otherwise. He asked me what was wrong, and I told him, stripping the emotion from the story until it was just facts. I told him Julian had accused me of trying to seduce my way into a promotion. David's face hardened, not with anger at me, but with a protective frustration. He asked me if I wanted to quit, if I wanted to sue, if I wanted to make a scene, and I told him no. I told him that violence, even legal violence, was not the way to restore truth. If I sued, it would become a scandal. If I quit, it would look like an admission of guilt. The only way to fix this was to understand why Julian believed it in the first place. People do not invent fantasies out of thin air. There is always a seed, a whisper, a piece of misinformation that takes root in the soil of insecurity. Julian is a billionaire, yes, but he is also a man who built an empire from nothing, and men like that are often guarded against people who want something from them. He expects transaction. He expects everyone to have a price. My job was not to prove I didn't have a price, but to prove that my currency was competence. I spent the next week working in a silence that felt louder than any argument. I came to the office early, I left late, and I communicated primarily through email, keeping my interactions with Julian strictly necessary and documented. I wanted to create a paper trail, not to trap him, but to protect myself. Every instruction he gave me, I confirmed in writing. Every deliverable I submitted, I copied the HR director. It was a defensive posture, but it was necessary. I watched him from a distance, observing the way he interacted with others, the way he looked at the new junior assistant who had started a month prior. I noticed things I hadn't seen before. I noticed that Julian was tired. Not physically, but spiritually. There was a weariness in his eyes that suggested he was fighting battles on multiple fronts, and perhaps I had become a casualty of a war I didn't know was happening. I began to dig, not into his personal life, but into the company chatter. I listened to the conversations in the break room. I noticed the way certain people lingered near his office. I paid attention to the emails that were CC'd to me that shouldn't have been. And I found the thread. It led back to Marcus, the VP of sales. Marcus had been vying for my position for years. He was aggressive, charismatic, and notoriously unscrupulous when it came to climbing the ladder. I remembered a lunch meeting a few weeks prior where Marcus had asked me about my weekend plans, and I had vaguely mentioned I was busy with family. He had pressed me, asking if I was seeing anyone, if I was happy with my work-life balance. At the time, I thought it was friendly curiosity. Now, I realized it was intelligence gathering. He had likely planted the idea in Julian's mind that I was unattached and ambitious, combining the two into a narrative that suggested I was using my single status as a tool. It was a classic maneuver. Undermine the competitor by questioning their morality. If Julian believed I was sleeping my way up, he would never trust my work again, and Marcus would be free to sweep in and take the strategic lead. Understanding the source of the poison did not immediately cure the wound, but it gave me a direction. I needed to address the misunderstanding, but I needed to do it on my terms. I couldn't just walk into his office and say, "Marcus lied." That would sound like office politics, like me trying to shift the blame. I needed Julian to see the truth for himself. I needed him to realize that his assumption was flawed, not because I told him so, but because the evidence of my character was undeniable. So I continued to work. I poured myself into the quarterly strategy, refining it, improving it, making it so undeniably good that it couldn't be ignored. I worked late nights, not to be seen, but because I cared about the work. I let my output speak, but I also began to wear the ring. I stopped turning it inward. I let the platinum catch the light of the office lamps. I didn't make a show of it. I didn't talk about my wedding. I just let it be there, a quiet fact of my existence. I noticed Julian's eyes dropping to my hand during our brief exchanges. I saw the confusion register, the flicker of doubt. He was a man who noticed details. That was why he was successful. He noticed when a number was off by a decimal point, and he noticed when a ring appeared on a finger he had assumed was bare. But he didn't say anything. He was too proud, perhaps too embarrassed by his own outburst to ask. So the tension remained, a low hum beneath the surface of our professional interactions. The escalation came 3 weeks after the boardroom incident. We were preparing for the annual Investor Gala, a major event where Thorne Enterprises showcased its yearly successes to shareholders and the press. It was my responsibility to coordinate the presentation materials and the flow of the evening. Julian called me into his office late one Thursday evening. The sun had set, and the city lights were twinkling below like a field of stars. He was standing by the window, his back to me, holding a glass of scotch. He asked me to close the door. I did. He turned around, and I saw that the weariness I had spotted before was deeper now. He told me that he had heard rumors again about my conduct. He said people were talking, saying that I was leveraging my proximity to him to secure my position. He was testing me. He wanted to see if I would crack, if I would get angry, if I would deny it with too much fervor. I stood there, my hands clasped in front of me, and I waited for him to finish. When he was done, I spoke calmly. I told him that rumors are the currency of the insecure, and that I did not trade in them. I told him that my work spoke for itself, and that if he needed evidence of my commitment to the company, he could look at the retention rates of my team, the growth in our market share, the awards we had won under my direction. I told him that I respected him too much to compromise his company for personal gain, because I knew that if the company failed, my reputation would fail with it. I looked him in the eye and I said, "I am not here to take anything from you, Julian. I am here to build something with you." It was the truth, stripped of emotion. He stared at me for a long moment, and I saw something shift in his expression. It wasn't belief yet, but it was consideration. He nodded briefly and dismissed me, but as I turned to leave, I saw his eyes drop to my hand again. The ring was visible. He saw it, but he didn't ask. He was waiting for me to bring it up, perhaps thinking that if I mentioned it, I was using it as a shield. He wanted me to be honest without being prompted. He wanted to know if I would volunteer the truth when it wasn't convenient. That night, I called David. We had been engaged for 6 months, but the wedding planning had stalled. Not because of lack of love, but because of a growing realization that our lives were moving in different directions. David wanted to settle, to buy a house in the suburbs, to have children soon. I wanted to continue building my career, to travel, to reach the executive level I was currently fighting for. We loved each other, but we were wanting different things from the future. The incident with Julian had shaken me, not because of what Julian said, but because of what it revealed about how the world saw me. It made me question whether I was protecting my privacy too much, whether hiding my engagement was actually hiding a part of myself that grounded me. David and I talked for hours. We talked about the pressure, the expectations, the way work consumed us. And we came to a mutual, painful understanding. We realized that we were holding on to the idea of us rather than the reality. We decided to end the engagement. It was not a dramatic breakup, no shouting, no throwing of rings. It was a quiet conversation over tea in our kitchen, where we acknowledged that we wanted the best for each other, and that the best for each of us was not together. It was sad, but it was clear. And in that clarity, I felt a weight lift. I was no longer hiding the ring because I was engaged. I was taking it off because I was free. But I didn't take it off immediately. I kept it on for 1 more week. Not for Julian, but for me. I needed to feel the transition. I needed to know that my value was not tied to my relationship status, whether I was taken or single. I was Selena, and that was enough. The climax arrived on the night of the Investor Gala. The ballroom was filled with the elite of New York, the chandeliers casting a warm glow over the black-tie crowd. I was managing the flow, ensuring the speakers were ready, the slides were correct, the timing was precise. Julian was holding court near the stage, charming investors, smiling the smile of a man who owns the room. I was standing in the wings, checking my watch, when Marcus approached me. He was smiling, holding a glass of champagne. He leaned in close, too close, and whispered that he hoped I was enjoying the evening, that he heard Julian was going to make a big announcement about the leadership structure tomorrow. He implied that I should enjoy my last night in power. It was a threat, veiled as camaraderie. He thought he had won. He thought Julian's distrust was solidified. I looked at him and I felt a surge of calm. I didn't need to fight him. The truth was about to surface, not because I forced it, but because the situation demanded it. Just then, Julian walked over. He had seen Marcus leaning in. He saw the discomfort in my posture. He asked if there was a problem. Marcus laughed it off, said we were just chatting about the event. Julian looked at me, asking for my version. I could have lied. I could have said everything was fine, but I chose truth. I said Marcus was implying that my position is uncertain based on rumors you may have heard. It was bold. It was risky, but it was honest. Julian's eyes narrowed. He looked at Marcus, then back at me. He asked me what rumors. And then I made the choice. I didn't mention the engagement immediately. I mentioned the integrity. I told him, the rumor is that I am using personal relationships to advance. I want you to know, publicly, right now, that my advancement is based on merit. And to prove that I have no hidden agenda regarding you, I will tell you that I am not available, nor have I ever been available for such things, because I value my professional boundaries above all else. I didn't say I was engaged. I said I was not available. It was a distinction that mattered. It protected my privacy while asserting my boundary. But Julian is smart. He heard the past tense in my voice. He saw the ring on my finger, which I had not removed, even though David and I had decided to part ways. He realized that I was protecting someone or protecting a principle. He stepped closer, ignoring the crowd, ignoring the music. He said, "Selena, look at me." I did. He said, "I need to know the truth, not the professional truth, the human truth. Are you protecting yourself from me, or are you protecting someone else?" It was a moment of vulnerability for him. The billionaire boss, stripped of his armor, asking for honesty. I took a breath. I decided then that the privacy I had guarded so fiercely was less important than the trust I had lost. I lifted my hand. I looked at the ring, and I told him I was engaged. I am no longer. But that does not change my work. It does not change my integrity. I did not hide it to trick you. I hid it because I wanted to be seen for my mind, not my marital status. The silence between us was absolute. The music seemed to fade. Julian stared at the ring, then at my face. He looked ashamed, not angry, not defensive. Ashamed. He realized that his assumption had been wrong. He realized that he had judged me based on a narrative created by a rival, and that he had nearly destroyed a valuable partnership because of his own insecurity. He looked at Marcus, who had gone pale, sensing the shift in the air. Julian didn't yell at Marcus. He didn't make a scene. He simply said, "Marcus, I think you should go home. We'll discuss your role on Monday." It was a dismissal, quiet and final. Marcus left, his face tight with defeat. Then it was just Julian and me, standing in the wings of the gala, surrounded by the muffled sounds of celebration. He turned back to me. He apologized. It wasn't a corporate apology. It wasn't "I regret any inconvenience." It was a human apology. He said, "I was wrong. I let my own history cloud my judgment of you. I assumed everyone wants something, and I forgot that some people just want to do good work." He reached out, not to touch me, but to gesture towards the ring. "You didn't have to tell me," he said. "You could have let me believe what I wanted. It would have been easier for you." I told him, truth is never easier, but it is the only foundation worth building on. He nodded. He looked at me with new eyes. The disdain was gone. In its place was respect and something else, something warmer. He asked me if I was okay regarding the engagement. I told him I was. I told him that sometimes things end so that the right things can begin. He didn't push. He didn't ask if I was available now. He respected the boundary I had set. He simply said, "Thank you for your honesty, Selena, and thank you for your work." He walked out onto the stage to give his speech, and I watched him from the shadows. He spoke about integrity. He spoke about trust. He spoke about the importance of knowing the people you work with, not just their output, but their character. I knew he was talking about me. I knew he was correcting the record, not just for me, but for himself. The falling action of that night was quiet. The gala ended, the guests departed, and I went back to my office to pack up my things. Julian came in before I left. He didn't come as a boss. He came as a man who wanted to clear the air completely. He asked me if I wanted to get coffee, not to discuss work, but to talk. I agreed. We went to a small diner nearby, the kind that is open all night, with vinyl booths and the smell of grease and coffee. We sat in a corner booth, away from the prying eyes of the city. He told me about his past. He told me about the women who had tried to use him, the lawsuits, the betrayals. He explained that his guard was high because it had to be. He said that when he saw me, so competent, so close, he had felt a vulnerability he wasn't comfortable with, and he had lashed out to protect himself. It was an admission of weakness from a man who showed none. I listened. I didn't judge. I understood that trust is not given, it is earned, and sometimes it is broken and must be rebuilt. I told him about my decision to end my engagement. I told him about the difference between loving someone and building a life with them. I told him that I chose clarity over comfort. He listened intently. He didn't try to fix it. He didn't try to offer himself as a replacement. He just sat there, witnessing my truth. And in that witnessing, the distance between us closed. It wasn't a romantic closure, not yet. It was a human closure. We were two people who had misunderstood each other, who had found the bridge back to connection through honesty. The next few weeks were a period of reconstruction. The office dynamic changed. The rumors stopped, not because I suppressed them, but because Marcus was transferred to a different division and the source of the poison was removed. Julian and I worked together with a new rhythm. There was no tension, no guardedness. We could joke again. We could disagree without fear of misinterpretation. He started to include me in higher-level decisions, not because he felt he owed me, but because he trusted my judgment. I saw him change too. He became less isolated. He started attending team lunches. He started asking about people's lives outside of work. He learned that when you treat people with dignity, they give you loyalty in return. And I learned that vulnerability is not a weakness in leadership. It is a strength. It allows for correction. It allows for growth. One evening, about a month after the gala, Julian asked me to stay late again. But this time, there was no work on the desk. There were 2 cups of coffee waiting. He told me that he had been thinking about what I said at the diner, about choosing clarity. He said that he realized he had been living in a fog of suspicion for too long, and that I had helped him clear it. He stood up and walked around the desk. He stopped in front of me. He said, "I know I lost my right to ask you anything personal when I insulted you, but I want to earn it back." He didn't ask me out. He asked for permission to try. He said, "I would like to take you to dinner, not as your boss. As Julian, to see if the connection I feel is real or if it's just relief that the tension is gone." It was the most respectful request I had ever received. He gave me an out. He gave me the power to say no without consequence. I looked at him. I saw the man behind the title. I saw the humility. I saw the intelligence that I had admired from the start, now applied to his own emotions. I thought about David and the gentle fade of our relationship. I thought about the insult in the boardroom and how far we had come since then. I thought about the value of trust and how rare it is to find someone willing to admit they were wrong and try to make it right. I told him yes. Not immediately, but after a pause. I told him, "We have to be careful, we have to be professional, but yes, I would like to have dinner with you." He smiled, and it was a genuine smile, one that reached his eyes. We didn't rush. We took it slow. We dated quietly, outside of work hours. We kept our relationship separate from the office, learning from the mistakes of the past. We built a foundation of friendship first. We talked about everything: books, politics, fears, dreams. I learned that he loved jazz and hated cilantro. He learned that I cried at dog commercials and wanted to learn how to sail. We discovered that we were compatible not just in business, but in life. And when we finally decided to make it public, it was not a scandal. It was a celebration. The employees saw that we were happy, that we were respectful, that we were a team. The rumors that had once threatened to destroy us were replaced by a narrative of redemption. The ending of this story is not a fairy tale where everything is perfect. There are still challenges. There are still days when the stress of the company weighs on us, days when we disagree. But the difference is in how we handle it. We handle it with communication. We handle it with the understanding that trust is a living thing that needs to be fed. I look at my hand now, and there is a different ring there. Not the one I wore during the investigation, but a new one, chosen together, symbolizing a future built on truth. Julian is still my boss, but he is also my partner. We navigate the complexities of power and love with care, always prioritizing the integrity of the company and the honesty of our bond. I think back to that day in the boardroom, to the sting of the insult, and I don't feel anger anymore. I feel gratitude. Because if he hadn't made that mistake, if he hadn't pushed me to the edge, I might never have found the courage to demand the truth. I might have stayed in a relationship that was fading. I might have stayed in a job where I was undervalued. The conflict forced me to define myself. It forced me to choose clarity over anger. And in doing so, I found a love that was not based on assumption, but on knowledge. I found a partner who knows my flaws and chooses me anyway. There is a lesson in this for anyone who has ever felt misunderstood, who has ever been judged before they were known. It is that your truth is your power. You do not need to scream it. You do not need to fight for it with violence or vengeance. You just need to live it. You need to stand in your integrity, even when it is uncomfortable, even when it is lonely. Eventually, the truth surfaces. It has a way of rising to the top, like oil on water. And when it does, it clears the way for what is meant for you. I learned that I am not defined by what people think of me. I am defined by what I know of myself. And when I know myself, I can teach others how to see me. Julian sees me now. He sees the woman who works hard, who loves deeply, who values honesty above comfort. And I see him. I see the man who learned to trust, who learned to apologize, who learned that love is not a transaction. We are building a life together, brick by brick, conversation by conversation. It is a modern love story, one that fits into the busy, complicated world we live in. It is not about grand gestures or dramatic rescues. It is about showing up. It is about listening. It is about choosing each other, every day, with eyes wide open. I often think about the women who might hear this story, the women who are sitting in boardrooms right now feeling small, feeling judged, feeling like they have to shrink themselves to fit into someone else's narrative. I want them to know that they don't. I want them to know that their value is intrinsic. It is not dependent on a man's approval. It is not dependent on a ring on a finger. It is dependent on the work they do and the character they hold. If you are insulted, do not retaliate with insult. Retaliate with excellence. If you are misunderstood, do not confuse yourself trying to explain. Let your actions speak. And if you are hurt, do not close your heart. Heal it and then open it again, but only to someone who has earned the key. That is the resolution. That is the happiness. It is not the absence of pain, but the presence of trust. It is the knowledge that you can be vulnerable and still be safe. It is the knowledge that you can be wrong and still be forgiven. It is the knowledge that love, real love, is worth the risk of clarity. The city outside my window is still loud. The phones are still ringing. The market is still fluctuating. But inside this space, inside this relationship, there is peace. We have created a sanctuary of honesty in a world of noise. And that is the greatest success of all. Not the billions, not the titles, but the quiet confidence of knowing that when I walk into a room, I am known. I am seen, and I am loved for who I am, not for who someone thinks I should be. This is the story of how I reclaimed my trust. This is the story of how I chose clarity. And it is a story that I hope continues, not just for me, but for anyone who believes that truth is the best foundation for a happy ending. We are still writing it. Every day is a new page, but the theme is set. It is love. It is respect. It is truth. And that is enough. That has to be enough. Because in the end, when the lights go out and the office is empty, it is the people who remain. It is the connections we forge. It is the hands we hold. And I am holding on to this, to us, to the life we have built from the ashes of a misunderstanding. It is strong, it is real, and it is mine. I remember the first time Julian held my hand after we started dating. We were walking along the Hudson River, the wind blowing off the water. He didn't say anything. He just reached out and took my hand. His palm was warm, his grip firm. It wasn't a possessive grip. It was a supportive one. It said, "I am here." And I squeezed back. It said, "I know." We didn't need words. We had already said everything that mattered in that diner, in that office, in that boardroom. We had cleared the debris. We had swept the floor. And now we could dance. It sounds cliché, I know, but sometimes the clichés are true because they are universal. We all want to be understood. We all want to be valued. And sometimes we have to go through the fire to find out who stands with us in the heat. Julian stood with me. He didn't run when it got hard. He stayed. He fixed what he broke. And that is the mark of a man worthy of love, not perfection, but repair, not never making mistakes, but owning them. I am grateful for the mistake. I am grateful for the insult, because it was the catalyst. It was the push I needed to stop hiding, to stop protecting myself from life, to step into the light. And now I am not afraid of the light. I am not afraid of being seen, because I know what I see in the mirror. I see a woman who survived. I see a woman who chose well. I see a woman who is loved. And that is the only title I need. The seasons have changed since that night in the boardroom. Winter has turned to spring, and now summer is approaching. The trees outside are green again. Life goes on, but we are different. We are wiser. We carry the scar of the conflict, but it is healed. It is part of our history, not our future. We talk about it sometimes when we are quiet, when we are reflecting on how far we have come. We laugh about it mostly. It seems absurd now that a ring could cause so much trouble. But it wasn't the ring. It was the fear, and we have conquered the fear. We have replaced it with faith. Faith in each other. Faith in ourselves. And that faith is the engine that drives us forward. I look at Julian now, working at his desk, focused and calm. He looks up and catches my eye. He smiles. I smile back. It is a small moment, but it is everything. It is the resolution. It is the happy ending that we earned. Not given, earned, through work, through words, through truth. And I would not change a thing, not the pain, not the doubt, not the long nights. Because they led me here, to this moment, to this love, to this life. And I am ready for whatever comes next. Because I know who I am, and I know who is standing beside me. And that is all the security I will ever need. There is a quiet confidence that comes from knowing you have navigated a storm and come out the other side intact. It is not arrogance, it is assurance. It is the knowledge that you can handle difficulty, that you can handle truth, that you can handle love. I carry this with me into every meeting, every decision, every day. I am not the same woman who walked out of that boardroom crying inside. I am stronger. I am clearer. I am freer. And I hope that my story serves as a reminder to others that they too can find this freedom. You do not have to accept the narrative others write for you. You can write your own. You can choose clarity. You can choose truth. You can choose love. It is available to you. It is waiting for you. You just have to be brave enough to reach for it. And when you do, when you finally grasp it, you will realize that it was worth the wait. It was worth the pain. It was worth every second of the struggle, because the view from the other side is beautiful. The air is cleaner. The light is brighter. And the heart is whole. That is my wish for you. That is my wish for us, to remain whole, to remain true, to remain loved. This is the end of the story of the insult, but it is the beginning of the story of us. And I cannot wait to see what happens next. I cannot wait to turn the page, because the best chapters are yet to be written, and we will write them together, with honesty, with integrity, with love. That is the promise, that is the resolution, and that is the truth. I think about the legal aspects sometimes, the HR policies, the rules that govern our workplace. They are important, they provide structure, but they cannot govern the heart. They cannot mandate trust. Trust is organic. It grows in the soil of consistency. It blooms in the sunlight of honesty. We have tended to this garden carefully. We have weeded out the doubts. We have watered the connection, and now it is flourishing. It is a testament to what is possible when two people decide to prioritize understanding over being right. It is easy to be right. It is hard to be connected. We chose connection. We chose each other. And in doing so, we created something that is resistant to the rumors, resistant to the gossip, resistant to the noise of the outside world. Because our foundation is solid. It is built on rock, not sand. And when the storms come, as they always do, we will stand. We will hold fast. We will remember the boardroom. We will remember the diner. We will remember the choice. And we will choose again. Every day, we will choose again. That is the secret. That is the work. Love is not a destination. It is a practice. And we are practicing it well. We are getting better at it. We are learning. We are growing. And that is the most romantic thing of all, to grow together, to evolve together, to become better versions of ourselves because of each other. That is the goal. That is the dream. And it is real. It is happening. Right now, in this life, in this love, in this truth. So I close my eyes and I breathe. I feel the rhythm of the city. I feel the beat of my own heart. I feel the presence of the man I love, and I am at peace. The journey was long. The path was winding, but I am here, and I am home, not in a place, but in a person, in a truth, in a feeling. This is what I wanted. This is what I sought. Not vengeance, not victory, but peace. And I have found it, and I will keep it. I will protect it. I will cherish it, because it is precious, because it is rare, because it is mine. And that is the story, that is the voice. That is the truth. Selena, 32, engaged to life, engaged to truth, engaged to love, and ready for the future, whatever it holds. I am ready, we are ready, and that is enough. That is everything. The end of the misunderstanding. The beginning of the understanding. The start of the rest of our lives. Together, always with clarity, with love, with truth. This is the resolution. This is the happy ending. And it is real, it is ours, and it is beautiful.